Good morning, everyone. So we're lucky enough today to have Crawford Hollingworth from the Behavioural Architects, who will tell us the background to the highly commended entry to the AQR Qualitative Excellence Award 2022. And the format is, I think Simon will introduce Crawford. Crawford will then start and I will come back in again at the end. So goodbye from me and see you later.
Great. Well, I don't think I really need to introduce Crawford. I think everyone knows Crawford, a very well-known behavioural architect, and also previous winner of the AQR Qualitative Excellence Award in 2018. So we're delighted to welcome Crawford here. Crawford, thanks so much for taking the time to spend this webinar with us. Crawford's going to take us to Sydney and talking about trees or not. When I was 13, so you can work out the age, there was a campaign in the UK called Plant a Tree in 73. And then in 1974, there was another one called Plant One More in 74. Now, I think things have moved on a little bit since then, and Crawford's going to share with us his fascinating case study about Sydney and trees. Many thanks, Crawford.
I think, Simon, we could have plant one now for 2023 and plant one next year for 2024, if you like. Let me find my screen to share. So is that showing for those who are with us today? I'm going to take that. If anyone says yes, Simon says thumbs up. Everybody, how lovely to talk to those who've managed to join us today. I think this is a really interesting piece of work to share with the AQR, because in a sense, it's quite an interesting methodology for anyone who's wrestling with behavioral change in lots of spaces, and I've tried to expand on some of our kind of global learnings from this, particularly because it's a lot of this, as you'll see, is trying to move people from one intention into action, and you'll hear me talk quite a lot about that today. Pleased to say, if you need to stop me, do. I can't see if questions are there, otherwise I can do some questions at the end. But let me take you on a little journey, as Simon says, down under. I'll try not to speak in an Australian accent. And it's a really fab project that I think you're going to enjoy, which literally has made the world greener. And that's kind of cool in itself, because we need a lot more work like this. So I'm going to start talking about a term. I wish I could see some of you. Maybe I should test Simon on this, a term that you may have heard and you may not. We're in Greater Sydney, a city particularly prone to what's called an urban heat island effect. Get that in your breakfast or tonight in your evening drink, the urban heat island effect. I'm sure actually most of you knew this. And so what it is urban heat islands happen when there is an area which has a lot of hard sealed surfaces, as you can see here, and less green infrastructure. And that means things like tree canopies, vegetations, waterways. And that's because what happens is hard surfaces absorb and store and radiate heat. I feel as though I'm on some great scientific program here, radiate heat, while green infrastructure reflects heat and provides shade and releases water and other such things. So green infrastructure makes local areas also easier to encourage people to spend time outdoors and all the other kind of important social aspects. It also provides a habitat for animals and plants, and again, increases that kind of important kind of variety and diversity in cities. Now, these urban heat island effects, by the way, are pretty substantial. In areas like Greater Sydney, this can put 10 degrees centigrade on a temperature. And believe me, if you're knocking around 35 and 40, 10 degrees higher is much, much hotter. So here was our really kind of cool behavioral challenge, was how do we create a more sustainable, livable, if you like, and certainly cooler Greater Sydney. And that's where you look at something like green and you realize how important it is in a very kind of meta way. And to do this, you know, what this means simply is we need trees. We need lots and lots of trees. And these trees will mean shade, they mean cleaner air, they mean more beautiful places to live. And the New South Wales Premier, which is the kind of government, made this a real priority. He said, I want to green our city. In fact, he called it the Green in Our City program, with quite an audacious target. I mean, that is some target. I want 1 million new trees planted by the end of 2022. And the prime target for the goal, this is really an important part, was people like you and people like me. People who live in somewhere like Greater Sydney and have private property, and they want us to plant one of those on our land. Now, suddenly, I wish I could see again people here. I feel that maybe a few listeners begin to go, oh, hold on a moment, what do you mean plant on our land? And that well-known NIMBYism beginning to raise its hand, or its head even. Let's be honest, you're all feeling a little bit of that now. And as this is a behavioral science, we all love here the power of social norms. And in particular, we wanted to try to get people to actually talk about planting trees, to tap into this really important thing called dynamic social norms, and also to let us know they had done it. So again, if you think about it, I want you to plant a tree, but I also want you to tell me you've done it and tell me on my government website. So quite a lot to ask you. Because I know I can use that power of social norms, dynamic social norms, to make it work. Now, I'm sure lots of you have worked on amazing projects. This is one of those dream projects, because you get to do research the way we always want to do it, which has lots of interesting parts, like an opera. There's lots of different stages. And again, these different parts helped us illuminate different penetrating insights. And again, thanks to the fab AQR, I thought you as an audience would like me to maybe unwrap a little bit of quite a complex methodology. As I said, it's a bit of a dream methodology. Usually budgets don't allow for these sort of things, but I'm going to give you 4 stages of it and try and bring it alive a little bit. In our methodology, we had stage 1, and don't worry about these charts, there's a lot on them, which is called the define stage. It's a really important part in lots of our behavioral science projects. Yeah, where there are 4 components on this. Yeah, what is trying to understand what is the issue and problem. That kind of definition workshop is really exciting. And then using a behavioral science lens to look at all the existing campaign, because back to Simon's in 1973, lots of people have tried this, and we can have lots of insights to maybe why things have worked and not worked. And then, of course, vital stakeholder interviews, because this is government, there's lots of people involved, and that's why we did 25 of them. And then again, what we do as a company day in, day out is we run behavioral journey workshops where we look at where someone is, where we want them to go, and we hypothesize what are the triggers and barriers that will take them on their journey towards that audacious goal of 1 million trees. Then stage 2, the discover phase. And again, 4 parts in this one. One of the really interesting ones was running community consultation workshops, trying to really understand some of those community barriers. And we did 5 of those. We also run a really interested in trying to get a sense of what community's sentiment is. It was called the Community Sentiment Tracker, with a sample of over 1,000, and it was a key part of discovery stage was that to see what was really going on. And then something which is very core to work you probably heard me talk about before, work we've lucky to win awards on, we often use behavioral detective ethnographies, and we like empowering people with that sort of language so they feel important to our project. And we did 40 of these, getting them to work as online detectives all over kind of the Greater Sydney area, exploring what are all those kind of triggers and barriers. And we worked with all those people over a 2-week period, giving them tasks and questions and things as we went through to unlock insight. And again, one of the interesting things here is, again, we're lucky. We've spent a lot of time with creative agencies involved in government projects and doing depth interviews with creatives to come up with what they've done, ideas they've had, ideas that haven't worked, and using them as very much part of the discover phase. It's a pretty intense discovery stage, you know, and you come out, as I said, really knowing what those triggers and barriers are, or the hypothesized triggers and barriers, let's be clear here, hypothesized triggers and barriers. And then you move on to, in a sense, the kind of develop stage, which is like, we've learned all this information, you know, and this is in this part of our research, we present insights and a proposed strategy, taking all that information, particularly from the behavioral detective ethnographies, and saying, right, these are now the hypotheses we think are true, and this is now the strategy we think you should be adopting to get those 1 million trees planted. And it's a really exciting part of the thing when you see that come together, and I'm going to share that with you in a moment. And then, of course, you have to work with the creative agencies and the fabulous media agencies to get a plan that will work within the contextual understanding we've unlocked to get all those trees planted. I feel as though I'm priming you all to plant trees this bank holiday weekend, so I want you to tell me whether you did on next Tuesday. As I said, one of those super involved projects, and we even had a stage 4, which we are lucky in all our projects we do get, where essentially you test and refine concepts and ideas. And again, some of those interesting methodological parts here, you know, we did co-design community workshops, again, looking at things we were doing and the creative agencies. You know, we trialed interventions, again, trying to see what impact they had at a conscious and subconscious level, to agree on sort of actions that we finally decided we were going to do in an implementation workshop. Let's get out and actually do something. And then we set up a behavioural tracker survey to monitor the impact of that work. Now, I know you're going, lucky you to have all these moving parts. And yes, I know we're very lucky. And I love this flowing visual, which kind of brings alive those moving parts. So let's dive into some of those insights and some of those actions, and start with this really kind of critical behavioural science starting point for this project, which is what I mentioned right at the beginning. And this is a place where lots of the Behavioural Architects projects start, understanding the gap, or in this case, the gulf between what people say they want to do and what they actually do. And everybody here will recognise this. In behavioural science language, and this is why I think it's a very interesting study to learn from, is what we call the intention action gap. And we all recognise that even though we may have the best intention of doing something, I know I certainly do, and even the knowledge or even the understanding you need of why we should do it, we often fail to put that intention into action. Lots of behavioural change work is about understanding this gap and then developing change strategies to either bridge that gap or move people at least a bit further towards action. And what we all knew was any behavioural change around sustainability, because we do a lot of work in sustainability, which is such a ridiculously broad term, the gap is often a gaping chasm that we need to bridge. What we know from a recent BIT survey is that almost 9 in 10 people say they would like to make more sustainable choices in their life. Huzzah! But what a ridiculous statement. It's such a broad statement. What does it actually mean? We see most people say this, they want to do their bit for the environment versus actually do any action against it. Because we all know, and the data clearly shows that, intention is not enough often to change behavior. In fact, in the same survey, 9 in 10 people say it's too hard to make sustainable choices because of the barriers. So you start off with 9 out of 10, yay! And then unfortunately 9 out of 10 say, oh, no, I can't do it. And in this project, as in many other, behavioral science can help us now think differently about that intention action gap. To actually ask the question, maybe in a different way, you know, and I think this is, again, for me, a great example of what I've learned in my years in behavioral science is sometimes think about how you might reframe a question, ask it in a different way. You know, is there a way of reducing the gap by rethinking how you reframe the intention? Rather than getting what lots of people do is leverage people's intention for care for the environment. We see that all the time. Or be an eco-warrior or whatever it is, which has, you know, it's like, but literally it's like banging your head against a proverbial wall. We could reframe it, we felt, and we looked around for this to make it more personal, to tap into individual motivations versus more kind of, I guess, ethereal collective ones. So again, lots of thoughts that I hope you can think about in other projects you'll all be working on. And again, there's lots of inspirational examples. I'm not saying these are necessarily right or wrong. They're just interesting examples that help us think differently about barriers and triggers. So interesting here, take, cloth nappies. Research has shown parents are much more motivated to use these if you talk about saving space in the bin, and saving money versus saving the planet, because again, it's a personal reframed motivation. Again, you might have seen work we've done with Darwin. Gosh, that's name dropping, isn't it? Great-grandfather. So he was great-grandfather of, or great-great-grandfather of our client, about reducing meat eating. And again, what we found there was, don't talk about stop eating meat, talk about lowering your cholesterol or living longer, healthier lives. Very personal benefits versus is talking about cows give off all this stuff, stop eating meat, stop having cows because of the CO2 and whatever they give off. And a final example, and again, I think maybe a crazy one, but I kind of love it. I love the craziness of it. Rather than talking about saving the planet with electric cars, talk about the fact that your petrol car could be beaten off the traffic lights. Because if you've ever been in an electric car, they go like they're clappers. So again, you could appear to very different motivations, that kind of boy racer. I'm not suggesting anyone goes out and does any boy racing today, but you can see it's a very different approach. So before sharing, what I'm going to do is 4 insights that actually, I guess, literally changed the world. And it's a nice bit of subconscious priming or even conscious priming. I'd like to share a couple of clips from some of the ethnographies that bring alive the differences between people and the challenges we were facing in this kind of, again, this audacious goal. I think also particularly because probably most people here are from the UK or Europe, you're going to love this because it gives you a great kind of cultural insight as well. This rather wonderful man and his love of the outdoors, and there he is. And I'm gonna let me see if I can make this actually work.
Hi, I'm Rob Query, and welcome to our garden. This is our patio, which we use a lot. Sit out here and read, sit and look at the birds in the garden. So follow me into the garden. My wife's got a little herb garden here, which is we've had to look after by hand with the drought. It's coming along a treat. We've got a little bush full of chilies. We've got the mint there that's going crazy. 2 weeks ago, that was dead. There was nothing on it. So turn around and follow me. Now, this house we've been in for 22 years. And when we came, there was no garden. There wasn't a tree, not one tree in the yard. Have a look at this now. We've got loads of them. We love our trees. They're great for shade. They bring the birds. And they're just calming when you're sitting out on the patio. They look just beautiful. These were, we had to hand water them during the drought with a little watering can. My wife looks after all that. I filled the cans. She put them on, put the water on the plants. And we've managed to save most of them. It's looking pretty good, I think. Pretty good. In fact, the grass is growing so much, I'm going to have to go and water it. Okay. I hope you liked our garden.
Always happens in a call. That was someone on my front door. I hope it didn't disturb anyone. I thought you'd love him, and I wanted to give you a real contrast. In my mind, I like to think these people live next door to each other, but they don't. Okay, here we go.
The tour begins of the backyard. Swimming pool, which is fantastic for me and the family in summer. In great condition at the moment. Love spending time out here with the kids. Walk down a little thing into my backyard, which is basically a resort oasis. Grasses, AstroTurf, tennis table sitting there, undercover awning where we spend plenty of time out here. Over there on the barbecue, dartboard up on the wall, little pool table over there, little golf putting green here. And then you get to the problem in my yard regarding trees. There's a bit of a bamboo tree that's felled in the backyard. And you walk further around and you could probably see all the debris and all the leaves and all the crap in the yard coming from the trees over next door, which a guy refuses to cut down and gets me very, very agitated. So hopefully that's a good tour, and turn that around so you can see myself. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Thank you.
I love that. And when I look at that, I love the idea of them living next door to each other, but they don't. And his kind of attitude, like about trees, not in my backyard, you bastards, would be the Australian phrase for it. You might have had yard envy. I don't know. I love it. You know, as you went around the golf course, I always wanted to know whether, if you saw a dartboard, there was a picture above the dartboard, and I had a suspicion it might have been his neighbour's face, but who knows? So from this sort of behavioural deep dive, what was shown was that there's a lot of what we behavioural scientists call negativity bias at play, and it's a really powerful concept. I actually was talking on negativity bias yesterday in London. What behavioural science has shown us time and time again is that negative thoughts can dominate you and are much easier to kind of bring front of mind than positive associations. And it's a really important concept when you're trying to look at behavioural change. And as the quotes here clearly show. Our research also showed another behavioural science concept clearly at play. And this was the availability bias. And again, a really powerful thought here. Again, what pops into your mind when do you think of trees? And again, I'd love to know what's popping into your minds if we could talk. But basically in Australia, what we're finding, people associated trees, they think about large things in public spaces. I'm sitting here by Hyde Park. There's big trees out there. 1 in 3 people anchoring to the size when describing a tree. 1 in 3 talking about size. And trees being planted again in private spaces unlocks a whole negativity availability cascade. God, trying to say that in the evening. Negativity availability cascade. It felt good then. As a result, the system one, as you all know, that kind of fast automatic response brings those negative associations quickly to mind, and everyone decides trees are not suited for private spaces. So this is a really interesting but daunting negative barrier we are faced with. But we uncovered, again, skipping a lot here, a really powerful, deeper insight, which actually changed everything. And that was the green light, in a sense. I like the idea, green light. And like all great insights, is actually beautifully simple and strategically inspiring. We need to think of trees as being the output rather than an input. I'll just let you think about it for a moment. Trees being an output rather than an input. What we had learned is that people don't necessarily plant trees, they plant solutions to problems. They actually have a need, a real proper need or requirement, and trees can be the solution for that. They could have a desire for shade. They could have a desire for privacy. They could have a desire because they want, I don't know, more fruit, or they want color, or they want to bring wildlife into their space. So around this really powerful yet simple behavioral insight, we created what is called 4 strategic jobs to be done. And we all love a jobs to be done model. First of all, people want to address issues in their garden. So how can we make a tree the answer to the problem? So it is the consent of the strategic job. Sorry, excuse me there. So what we want to do is give salience to trees as benefits, as solutions, okay? And not as, let's look at a big tree. Let's talk about the salience of the benefits, the salience of the solutions. Number 2, we want the word tree itself is a barrier. In fact, one of our learnings was don't use the word tree as much as possible. Trying to work, if you want people to plant trees, try not to use the word trees, which is a great thought in itself. It's a barrier, triggering thoughts of oversized trees in parks, evoking thoughts of danger, inconvenience, and mess, as that person clearly showed in that beautiful film. So the strategic job there is build a more appealing vocabulary, even, as I say, avoiding the word trees. The third strategic job we identified was people can be really daunted by the journey of, okay, if I want a tree, what do I actually do? So the strategic job here is to use behavioral science concept of what you all know, which is chunking or mental chunking, and to give people break the journey up and make the journey easy, 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 chunked down into simple steps, which is what we did. And finally, I think a super cool one and a powerful behavioral concept, social norms, as I said earlier, dynamic social norms. And the strategic job to be done here was to switch the association from tree removal, which is what we all get notifications about, what people think about, to tree planting. Tell me when trees have been planted, celebrate that. And again, so, get away from that association of cutting down trees. Let's celebrate and increase the salience of trees being planted around us. Again, a more dynamic, as I said, social norm. Around you, think about more and more people, your neighbors, everyone are planting trees. It's a really nice, simple thought. Conscious of time, I'm going to take you a little bit through some of the creative work. I'm not going to explain it. It was a multi-level campaign and lots of really cool things around events in Sydney as well. But what you'll see is really kind of simple thoughts. Lots of leaflets going out about the benefits of trees, about privacy, about shade, about it bringing wildlife in, really kind of simple things. And again, what the creative work did was highlight, more and more of these benefits about fruit, about community cooling, and about this really big thing at the moment, mental health. And again, a really kind of powerful campaign around that. If you look at some of the more media, the posters around Sydney, super cool ones. Don't you love that? Want to wake up to birdsong? Plant one today. No mention of the word tree. In this one there is. Tackle climate change by planting a tree. Again, appealing to a slightly different mentality. This one I love. Need for more privacy in your home? Plant one today. Super powerful. And a final one here. This is social norms, dynamic social norms. You want to be part of them. Join Greater Sydney in planting 1 million trees. Quite a powerful goal. And did it work? I hear you asking the question, did it work? Could we make that audacious target in a year to get 1 million trees planted? I keep saying that, 1 million trees planted. Well, it'd be pretty sad if we ended the saying, this is an example of making the planet green, if I said it failed. So I'm pretty sure you know that we actually did succeed in. So let me share a couple of top line facts, which again, we're deeply proud of. By the end of March 2022, we had overshot the 1 million target, which is just unbelievable. We were so thrilled. And honestly, the campaign has got many more waves still to run, and this is still growing. And again, I'm not going to give you lots of data. We had lots of complicated trackers, but the number of trees planted is the green bar, the active campaign. You can just see how essentially it took off. There was some energy there that it built on, but it took off. And that huge uptick in number of trees being planted. As I said, more waves, going to be more trees. And just before finishing, I was going to share this, but it's difficult to get online here. But a lot of people in Sydney use a lot of local services, government services. So there's a lot more use of kind of websites. And the dynamic social norm website they put up, I absolutely adored. And I'm trying to give you a visual of it. But essentially, you just saw this growing and growing and growing. There's more people, registered trees, and you've got more and more of these icons. It's just an incredibly powerful feeling that all these trees are being planted and you want to join in that dynamic social norm. And again, these are quite complicated surveys, but just look at that, look at what it means on the right, and you go, blimey, that is a lot of trees registered. And as I said, you look at any planning in the UK, it tells you about all the trees being cut down or being pruned, nothing about those planted. So that was sort of my journey today. I wanted to try and bring alive those 4 stages of the methodology to show you again how I think behavioral science makes you look at a problem in a different way. It makes you look at that intention action gap in a new light. And we got those incredibly powerful insight, essentially realizing don't really talk about trees, talk about the needs and benefits. And wow, did that catch fire? Well, actually, I shouldn't say that, should I? Because catch fire is a bad thing with trees. Caught on, maybe. And it would be remiss of me to say that although the AQR may have just given us a highly commended award, this work has actually won actually a lot more awards than this, but in the winter, December, it won the awards for the best sustainability research and also won the Grand Prix for social impact. And it's won a number of other awards around the world as well. Sorry for a bit of shameless, what's the word, promotion of the Behavioural Architects. We are quite nice people as well. I hope you enjoyed that, everybody. I'm really happy to try and answer some questions. And thank you for joining us in your lunch break or wherever today.
Simon, you're muted.
Something that rarely happens, Simon.
Sorry, I said excellent. Thank you very much, Crawford.
Pleasure.
And, Luella, do we have any questions coming through?
We have a comment from Lucy who says, love this, wow, just wow, amazing that the target is being smashed, and how inspiring. I want one. I'm on this website now, https://treesdirect.co.uk. But if you have any questions,
thank you, Lucy.
please put them in.
I love that, Lucy. Thank you. We love comments, questions, not even questions, comments like that. I feel my lunch is complete.
It sort of sparked a question in my mind, because I suddenly remembered having listened to you, or while I was listening to you, that I was involved in a tree planting campaign. I can't remember how many years ago. But the thing that cropped up was a gap between what the authority, which in this case was Westminster, wanted, and what it actually was prepared to do, because it was prepared to sponsor tree planting. You'd come up with ideas and it would then put barriers up as to why it wouldn't sponsor it. I wondered whether New South Wales was obviously very keen to get trees planted, but was there ever a disconnect between what they said and what they actually did?
Not in this case. In fact, this project has led to 3 more big significant environmental projects with them. Obviously Australia has its own issues. I think to your point though, I think that wherever you are, obviously getting authorities to see a benefit in something and therefore to make doing it easy is a very critical part of behavioral change. It's like, if I want people to, which I do, to recycle more things from their bathrooms, which very few people do, it's really hard if there's nowhere to put them. and if your local council is bunging them all in the same bin and it just doesn't work. So we probably wouldn't be doing our food waste if our councils didn't give us the bins. So again, lots of these things you've got to have tied up thinking or motivation again. If you go back to simple behavioral change, if you've got a lot of motivation and you've even, to do it, but it's hard to do, then you're not going to do it. The motivation ability and the triggers, or the ability and triggers don't work. So again, when we do a lot of government change work, or in fact, just behavioral change work, often we say like, right, is the issue here motivation? Is the issue here the ability to do it? Or is the issue here that people don't just get prompts or triggers to think about it at the right time? And those sort of behavioral change models really help you think about a problem in an enlightened way.
So how did they build on that after they'd done the campaign?
I think I might not be able to share that at the moment. But essentially doing more of the same, but it's like with all government things, things haven't been released yet, and it's for them to contain that media. So I won't share more on that. I'm sorry.
Interested to find out. Do we have any questions? It was such a superb presentation that it probably answered all of them as you went through. And
I really enjoyed doing it. I can tell you that when I was putting it together at the weekend, it's just really nice to talk about something where, and I do think, again, and everyone can come back to me outside of this, that if anyone's struggling with intention, action, just thinking about that methodology and just thinking about, sometimes, am I framing the intention in the right way? Does the intention really exist? Can I make the action smaller? Another thing I'm just writing a paper on for the MRS is how sometimes the action we want is too big, and sometimes actually make them micro actions. You know, little actions can actually lead to bigger things, like we want to floss your teeth, do a couple at a time, you know. And it builds. So again, I think, again, if people are interested in that space, let me know and I can share some things we're writing and publishing with the MRS on that as well, if I'm allowed to say. Obviously, we'd like to publish the AQR as well. I'm sorry, Simon. I'm just
Thank you.
We've had two communications. So one is, where will the recording be shared, please? And that's going to be on AQR's YouTube channel. Another one from Kevin, or two from Kevin, actually. Great talk, he says. And he's got a question, which is the connection between trees and water. One guy mentioned the drought.
yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And again, I'm Kevin, as I know very well. Kevin, I'm not an expert in the science of this. But I was very conscious that the government were talking about how it brought more moisture and stuff back into the air. But I understand trees can drain water as well. So I couldn't answer that. But I'm sure, Kevin, it's been well thought about before being actioned.
I did wonder actually about Venice and thinking about it being surrounded by water, but obviously it's just buildings, and whether it has a real problem in that area and what would happen if it wanted to go down that route. Anyway, that's by the by.
Yeah.
Any more questions, please?
My thing with Venice is to stop having big cruise ships going in and pushing all the water up.
I mean, the other thing that sort of crops up is authorities going, we're going to cut down this tree because it's costing us too much in terms of keeping it under control, and we've got complaints. But we will plant new ones that aren't as problematical. So I wondered how much of your project was, it was a certain type of tree rather than another type of tree.
I think there is there is a lot of trying to guide people into the right types of trees and realizing that I, by the way, plant a lot of trees. I have a lot of acers. They don't tend to be very big, you know, they're kind of like 15, 20 foot after 10 years. So I do think there is a bit of that. I think there's something quite interesting going on in some councils here. If those who've experienced trying to have, I've had to remove certain trees because they've got too big and they become seen as dangerous. And I have been encouraged and have planted up, I think they tried to get me to plant like 5 smaller trees to replace those. And I quite like that as well. So the positive frame is if you take one down, put 5 little ones back, but maybe better trees for that environment based on what you just said. They're not going to become too big. They're not going to be destroy walls or the kind of your house. But and again, I think if you go back to, and you were saying, I want to attract birds, I want to have fruit, I want color, it would naturally make you gravitate to certain types of trees anyway. You know, and again, if I'm in this country, I don't think there's a lot of people saying probably, I'm nothing against oak trees, but they're probably not all going, I must get an oak in my backyard garden, you know. Sorry, I sound anti-oak, I'm not, but it's sort of, you know.
I will share with you at some point a story about trees in the back garden and surveyors when it comes to selling, but I won't online. Simon,
Yeah, well,
I
I think that's, I mean, that's it's so good to hear this story, this case study, because I think it reminds us all that, you know, with global warming and all these demonstrations and so on, people trying to understand how they can help by making it personal. That's really the key, isn't it? And
you find a way of reframing what is motivating. And I think sometimes, as an industry, I think, you know, there are so many areas in pro bono where we've never been very good at bringing collective thought together around big issues. And, you know, and I see big issues sometimes being researched by big companies, and for lots of reasons then don't get pursued because there's too much cost involved or it's not a priority. And, you know, when I think about things like environment and issues we're all struggling with, and all the collective brain power in organizations like, you know, AQR and MRS and things, is I wish there were sort of vehicles where, you know, we could find a way of working together on some of those, in some of those spaces in a more powerful way, you know.
Yeah.
We do have one really good final question, which after this is Simon, if you'd like to say thank you, it would be great.
Yeah, sure.
It's from Bonnie Wang, who says, great talk. I am wondering if we can continue to frame trees as solutions to human (private) problems. Are we continuing to push the human nature / culture nature separation? What can behavioural science do about this? Inevitably, living with nature will not be all sunshine and lollipops. How do we live with differences and things that don't go with our plan and solution?
Well, my answer to that is I feel there might be a bit of confirmation bias going on there. And that Bonnie may have taken a particular angle of that, because actually one of the things which we talked about was actually trees and kind of, you know, nicer spaces and shade and whatever in a particular area like Greater Sydney brings people more outside and more into sharing community spaces anyway, or sharing spaces with other people. So again, I think that it's not using nature to put up barriers between people. I'm hoping that is actually bringing nature to bring people together in lots of different ways, from socializing. But I don't know, who knows? Who knows that the guy next door, you know, will start seeing beautiful birds in the neighbor's garden and start thinking, oh, I love that, and start chatting to his neighbor in a different way. You know, I mean, you know, or like my neighbors, I live in the middle of Oxford in a college house, you know, are always putting apples out their doors or fruit out the door for their neighbors to come and get and have a chat and stuff. So, you know, I do, if I'm understanding that question right, I'd love to be able to solve all those issues, but I do think that nature and the city can create, and I'm not just talking about private spaces, but public spaces, are great ways of reducing barriers, bringing people out, meeting people, reducing tensions, making mental health better and things like that, in my view. There's some very interesting studies, actually, Bonnie, which are about, you know, the use of, again, I think Brighton was a test place for trees and different types of benches that tried to, I guess, going back to being really old, trying to create some of those kind of 60s building projects that created safer, better spaces for people to hang out in. And if anyone knows Oxford at the moment, the centre of Oxford is more and more pedestrianised, and it's pedestrianised by giant plants and benches around those plants. So literally, if you go into kind of, you know, opposite Balliol and everything, that's now all pedestrianised with giant pots of plants and benches where you can sit and have a drink. I hope that answers your question, Bonnie Wang. And Kevin, I'm not going to tell you, actually, no, it was someone delivering a parcel, which they always do at this sort of time.
Brilliant. Crawford, thank you so much for sharing your story, your case study with us, and taking the time to present to us on the AQR Hub webinar series. I'd just like to remind everyone that the AQR Qualitative Excellence Award this year is 20 years old, and we will announce the call for submissions sort of the end of June, beginning of July. So please, you know, get your thinking caps on and get ready to submit, so that this time next year it could be you who's sharing their case study with us. Thank you very much.